today is a very, very special day for Surface Interval with Inah. Obviously, I'm sitting with good friend of mine, Ocean Ramsey. I don't think anyone needs an introduction about you, but there's something that I want to put out there, how we met and how you have helped us as a business, as a friend, to get so far into shark diving, the conservation, and also as a business. So I remember 21, I got in touch with Juan. Essentially, one of the video that went viral on Instagram during the pandemic, he commented on that video saying, wow, like something like with the aloha hand, the shaka hand. And I remember back in 2020, I wrote you guys an email because that's when I was starting our non-profit, and I had no idea how to run a conservation program. So I wrote an email to One Ocean, email that I found on internet, and I wrote to Juan, replied to his comment saying, hey, like, I have sent you guys an email, like, do you mind reading it? And he was like, so sorry, we don't check the emails often, something like that, he replied. And then he DM'd me immediately, and that's how I got in touch with Juan. And then I told him about my idea. He really loved it, and I said, you guys are welcome to come. And that was at a time that I was really struggling with after the pandemic, you know, like to restart the business. And we started in February 2020, and then March happened, lockdown. So everything was going really bad. So both of you were really, really kind enough to come here. I wasn't like, typically when you work with influencers, they just show up, like just like that, take whatever they can and they leave, post couple of reels or things. But you came with your videographer. What's his name at that time? I forgot. Jared.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Jared this amazing guy. You guys, I didn't even know. You prepared everything. You had a storyline that you guys want to put out there, and it kind of makes me emotional. You have no idea how that helped us to boost our business to this far, because since that video was done about the island, about me sitting in that restaurant, Royal Restaurant, I think, and Jared made this video, and you going back, and over the years, you have never stopped mentioning us, tagging us, and every time when you do something like that without even me asking for it, it meant a lot. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is like, it's so genuine from you both, and I came this far because of that help from the beginning from you guys.
But I think I like love, adore, and I think we do sometimes get stereotyped as like influencers, but we're not that type of influencers. We've never actually put that label on ourselves, and it's like what our work is about shark conservation, and part of shark conservation is working with people and communities. And you're genuinely one of the best people that I've met around the world, and the way that you take care of your team, both your human team and the sharks, is so commendable and immediately respectful. And so we did research before we came here. We had heard about Fuvahmulah, but hadn't seen it portrayed in that way. And I think coming here, meeting you, hearing your generational stories about how you would go diving and you guys would just see sharks. And I genuinely like listening to your stories and seeing the way that you have your team and the way that you've brought people back to your home island, and you guys have been able to work and actually benefit from protecting the sharks and educating people about that. It's not only commendable, but I'm actually so grateful for your work, because you're showing people from around the world, you're hosting them at your home island. And you're doing it in a way that shows that you can coexist. You can work with the fishermen. You can work with the community who's seeing the positive benefits of allowing people to come here and enjoy time with live sharks. And so for Juan Sharks and I, our goal and our mission, way before social media existed, is literally to help people to better understand and appreciate sharks. And that comes with really the most impactful way that we've seen it is getting them in the water. And so to run into our, we're like sea soul brothers, sisters, and to see you doing that naturally. And you're so good in the water too, and you have such a natural read on the animal's behavior. And that's something that in ways I have been able to teach that to a lot of people, but when it comes naturally, when it's something that like you grew up with and you're just sensitive to that, it was just so nice to come out and you guys wanted to learn. And I think that that's a big difference that we see is the people who just want the photo or just want to force an interaction or just want to find some benefit from something versus people who genuinely want to learn. They want to do it the right way. You wanted safety. You're like, hey, you've been doing this for 20 plus years, great whites, bull sharks, tiger sharks around the world. You're still alive. Like, come out, see what you can show us. And like you said, like you started with the conservation aspect, which is really what like speaks to me. And then the business aspect makes conservation more sustainable. Then you're not just relying on like grants, but you're actually including the public, which makes a way bigger impact. And so for me, I'm like, I have so much pride and gratitude in the work that you've done, and then seeing like how far you've come, the things that you've accomplished, and really like the network that it's gone out and the way that it's touched people's lives. Like you organized a school group for us to visit, and this was like COVID, and you know we had to wear the whole mask thing, and like, but you care about the kids, you care about the community. You were the first one to involve like a local woman, taking her out even in a full dress, swimming with a tiger shark offshore. And so it's like every single aspect, I feel like, you know, you're brilliant. You really think about everything. And I don't think people give you as much credit as you deserve, because I see one post in social media where maybe, you know, you're rolling a tiger shark and they jump to conclusions, or they see food in the water. And a lot of people, they don't read research papers. So they'll take one research paper on one species from one area of the world and they just like broaden it. And they're like, no, that's bad. And they're very closed-minded. Whereas like if they actually come here, they get to learn your stories. They get to understand the process. And they look at it on the bigger picture of things. They find that deeper appreciation. And I think that you're very good about communicating that. But like I love to highlight that around the world. I want more opportunities like what you've been able to facilitate here for other people to come to enjoy time with sharks, do it in a respectful and intelligent way, a safe way that benefits sharks and the local community. And that's my big thing too, is that people don't understand the aspects of having basically a community that's built around sharks. And so from the time that I came here, we could talk about that, like, wow, the changes that have happened.
What is so that was like 5 years ago, right? We first met, and now you are here, and 5 years later, for what you noticed then and now, like what's the biggest difference in terms of, you know, sharks or island or development, like from someone who as a visitor, what do you think about like the changes?
Well, you were so generous and gracious in inviting us to your home. You organized so that we could stay in a local family's house in a room. And there were no hotels at the time. Most of the roads were unpaved. I remember it rained, it flooded the roads, the mud, it flooded. And we were still diving every day, even in these like conditions. It was amazing. And we were learning and we're practicing and we're exploring. And we're seeing, oh, what's the difference in the behavior of the tiger sharks that we see in Hawaii or in Bahamas or these other areas of the world versus offshore. And then we had a great conversation. I remember talking about this and I was like, your home is so special. We want people to come here. We want you to show them your sharks. You guys have, you know, 5-star resort experience, plus all this training, plus you grew up here. But when people come, sometimes they bring a lot more plastic and debris. And so what did we do? We went and we looked at the current situation, which is also a lot of plastic. And that was when we talked about with Nature Friends Maldives, the filter project. Because it's kind of like, for us, it's like, yes, we want We want people to come and enjoy the world, to explore the world, to be able to appreciate the nature here, but we also want to protect it. And so working with you, I still remember even Jared's images, like being at the refuse station and seeing the plastic issue and wanting to see how could we also use visitors to help fund water filtration systems for the local homes. And so even from the very first time, the very first trip, we were always looking at not just shark behavior, not just safety, not just on a business aspect, but other broader conservation issues. That one I still see has gone kind of back and forth, because from subsequent visits, I saw the refuse station and they really started to cut down on the plastic. And now it's starting to kind of increase again. So I think what's happening, and you have a better, feel pulse on it here, but with the development, it's the rate of development at which the infrastructure can withstand the increase in tourism is kind of going through one of those little waves where you get an influx of people, but you have to be able to handle that volume in a responsible way, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the thing I always talk about. For example, when I have city council meetings and stakeholder meetings and things, is yes, tourism is good, development is good, but also we have to take care of the environment and the side effects that comes along with the. On one hand, people's livelihood is getting better, and we do a lot of shark conservation. And the other hand, we also live in carbon footprint. And we did at that time we ended up donating more than 300 filters. Mm-hmm. It was very generous from you and so many other people who have donated for the project, and we end up doing it. And now we are at a point we cannot keep up the pace of development, new restaurants, tourism, and everything. So that project is kind of on hold because we have to find a bigger solution, meaning a bottling plant with either glass bottle or some kind of bottles that we can reuse. That's really important to us to do it, and I'm working on that project.
But I love that you're working on that too, because I think a lot of people just see you as, oh, you're swimming with sharks, and they don't realize like how many different sort of like investment/conservation aspects that you're working on. Like you're contributing to research, you're talking to policymakers, you're trying to get a bottling plant where you could have glass bottles or aluminum cans or box water or something. So you're trying to address a lot of things, but what's really cool is at the core of it is like where you started, and it centers around the sharks. And so the multi-benefits of that, because it's like some people, they have a dive center and they just throw people in the water. They barely educate them. They maybe don't have a lot of safety and training, and they're definitely not trying to contribute and give back to the community. And I think that's an ever increase for our like respect level, is how much you care about your community. And so it's not just a dive. It's dive with the locals, and then you guys care about your community because you guys are from here.
I mean, essentially that's the most important thing, right? Like you can go and have a great dive with, 10, 15 sharks and come up. But if the entire community is not appreciating what we have around us, the good and the bad that comes with it, we have to address it. And it's always in the back of my mind, I want people to obviously go and enjoy it. I also want people to take care of it, all the positive and the negative that comes along with that. And that makes me want to go back in the water, like we have stayed in the surface.
You get a little break.
But in the water, I remember one of the very first dive we have did. You've been amazing. Like anyone who look at you underwater, like you're like a mermaid. You can stay there forever. Like you're really good with sharks.
The sharks taught me. They shaped me.
You have wrote a couple of books about sharks and their behavior. And what fascinates me when it comes to tiger sharks, especially, I've been fortunate enough to dive with you in Hawaii. I've done some Florida. I've done in Bimini and Bahamas and those areas, shark diving. And I've noticed the difference everywhere I have been in terms of how they approach to the humans, how they approach to if there's feeding going on, whatever. Like it's different. So you have done more places in the world. you literally have done everywhere, probably places where people don't even know you have been.
Everywhere except Palau.
Yeah. So what's like the biggest difference between that you have noticed in terms of shark behavior and how they approach to humans um, in the world? Like, is it obviously every destination has a history, like here fishermen discarding fish waste
Scraps.
throughout the history, and tourism came, and like we have our own way of doing it. I'm sure you have your ways to do it in Florida. And so in your opinion, what is it like that those approaches
Similarities and differences. Yeah. So without getting into like too specifics on each regional area, I think there's two ways to split it. There's one is what are the similarities and differences within the sharks' behavior themselves, and then similarities and differences in the sharks' behavior in the way that they're interacting with humans, and then also the way in which humans are interacting or facilitating those interactions. And so in each area, we're going to see something different. If I was to broaden it, like I kind of had to do in my book, because we're talking about over 400 different species, and I really like to focus more on the larger predatory species because of the human implications of interactions that way. If I had to broaden it, I would say sharks in the Maldives, but it's specifically in Fuvahmulah, they are probably on the most polite end. And I think it's because it's a healthy ecosystem. It's not necessarily even the discarding of the fish scraps, which is traditional here, is also traditional in Polynesia. It's traditional in Native American. It's traditional in a lot of indigenous populations, and it makes sense ecologically. Because if you're taking from the ocean the part that you don't use to discard that back into the ocean, that's carbon back into that ecosystem. So I'm actually really for that. I just feel like provisioning or feeding should be done in a really systematic, careful way where it's respectful of the animal's welfare and well-being, and also of human safety. Because if a shark bite happens or an accident happens, it makes the news, and that doesn't help the shark's reputation. Obviously, it doesn't help the person's appendage or life or their family if an accident happens. So I think it can be done responsibly. Here on a small island, and that's where I don't think people really understand, there's just no land to like discard the fish scraps. And again, it's like dumping it on land doesn't make sense. Put it back in the ecosystem. Just
that's
like
where we took it from, right?
Exactly. And so the part you're not using, you give it back, and it's a benefit. And so I would say that the sharks, because of the health of the ecosystem, they tend to be a lot more on the polite end. Whereas when I travel, and even back home, where we have a lot of boats, a lot of fishing technology, and not the best way of fishing, because you have these massive industrial, fishing vessels, no regulations on fishing. The reefs are destroyed, they're polluted, they're covered in fishing line. It's harder for the sharks there to find food. So on average, I see a lot more competitive behavior. We can also go into prey abundance, dietary preferences. Like in Hawaii, we have a lot of seabirds. And so a lot of the tiger sharks during certain times of the year are going to be a lot more surface oriented, going towards birds in those areas. You look at tiger sharks in Australia, depending on the part of Australia, they're targeting sea snakes, cephalopods, things on the bottom, lobsters. And so it's really interesting if you look at it from both a biological standpoint, but then also the way in which it's being conducted, and environmental conditions have a lot to play into it. Now, obviously, we can adapt to kind of anything, but there are limitations with environmental conditions. So when we have lower visibility, sharks on average are going to come a little bit closer. Now we're getting great close interactions and the beautiful dives out here. We've also got clear water so they can see us. And that's where I'm like, okay, now the responsibility comes back on the humans. Do we see them? And that's one of the biggest things I think to teach people. And you guys do a great job about this. I see one-on-one coaching with you and Ivan even in the water today with our divers on saying, hey, look around, be respectful, look around, be aware. We are in their home. It's their environment. They're coming in here. They have an important ecological role, pick off the weak, wounded, injured, sick, dead, dying animals. And it's really important that we're aware of their presence and their behavior, and we're adapting to that. So I see around the world, because I don't want to say there's a right way and a wrong way to do something, but there's definitely a more responsible, respectful, and safer way of doing something, which calculates in longevity, the shark's reputation, and people's appendages, would be to be in clear water, right? Understand where the shark's point of interest is, be mindful of the spacing, be mindful of their behavior, and constantly adapt to that. And so there's even other areas of the Maldives, which I always cringe if they ever make the news, because I'm like, it's not the guys in Fuvahmulah, it's not pelagic divers. These guys are very respectful, very skilled. You guys are working with them all the time. But accidents have happened in those areas, and it's usually in murky conditions. It's with divers who are not looking around. It's with dive guides who are maybe not trained. And to me, that's unfortunate, not just for Maldives, for you guys, but the industry as a whole. And that's an issue that we sometimes see. Florida, they can be a little reckless, right? They just throw people in, and I'm not trying to attack any region. I'm like, I love Florida. I love diving off of Florida. I love diving off Australia. But again, I think it's really, really important that people are looking at it on the big picture of things and doing something responsibly for the shark's sake as well as the human's sake. If you're putting that as your primary motivation, you can facilitate these beautiful and engaging, profound, and deeply impactful interactions. And those people who come out and dive with you, like, that is a core memory for them. And then when they hear about shark legislation, the protection of sharks around the world, which is still desperately needed in many areas, especially Australia, that then they're like, oh, I've had this beautiful dive with a tiger shark out in the Maldives.
Exactly.
I want them to be protected.
That's what I always say, for people, there is no magical way to educate people about sharks, because the fear about sharks are way bigger than the other side of it. It's disproportionately. But when it comes to whales, for example, cetacean, everyone, even someone who doesn't know how to swim, who is scared to go in the water, still love a cetacean, a dolphin, a whale, and everything. So for me, the way I look at it is the way to educate someone about sharks, which is one of the most, if not the most threatened marine life in marine species in the ocean, which is sharks and all different kind of sharks. And I cannot go and convince someone who have never been in the water with sharks and say it's safe, it's beautiful, you're gonna enjoy it, unless I take them in the water and show them how they are in the water. And it's safer. When it's done safe, it's safe, and they're beautiful, very intelligent, smart animal. And we host about 2,000 people a year in our dive center, and every single person who goes in the water, do this dive and come out, they never leave from here without wanting to come back. And they also go back to their moms, their dads, their husbands, wife, children, friends, everyone, try to talk how amazing it is. So I think the impact of what we do is changing one person at a time, essentially. And that's the way to protect and save sharks.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in comments. And I've even had personal friends, because Juan and I also surf, and we grew up in a surfing community. And so surfers can be very shark averse, because it's scary when you don't see what's under the water. And the human imagination really does tend to visualize the worst. And a little bit of that is evolution. It makes sense to be afraid of a predator. It makes sense to be afraid of what you can't see. And that's how human evolution has essentially evolved. So that aspect of the brain really got triggered when you have sensational films like Jaws, which are just Hollywood sensational, fictitious. They're not based off of the true behavior of sharks. And so it's really showing people video footage from us actually being in the water with them and guiding them in the water. That's the only thing that really helps people to overcome that fear, replace it with a high, healthy level of respect through education, but also the true awareness of what their actual behavior is. And we've tried everything. I think Juan says it all the time. He's like, I would just post beautiful photos of beautiful sharks, and people are like, oh, it's just a monster on its way to its next meal. But then you put a person in the frame, and suddenly they can visualize themselves in our position. And then the next step is, okay, I've had people literally comment in social media. They're like, I've been watching you for 10 years, pretty much just waiting for you to die. You're not dead yet. Okay, maybe I'll go out and I'll try this with you. And then they go out and they're like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever done. But I think that those interactions, they're beautiful. And I'll say they're safe. They're safe because they are facilitated from people who have spent decades and decades and decades in the water observing the behavior of sharks. You said growing up here, you'd be out, and you're on the reef and you see a shark, you're naturally picking up on the behavior. And that's how I started too, is just growing up with parents who honestly respect marine life. They obviously love the ocean. And I spend time in the water and I see a shark almost as if it's a dolphin or a sea turtle. Now, with a healthy level of like, hey, I've got to observe the behavior of any animal I don't understand. But that is actually something else I'd love to talk about. And that's where people really want to, I call it cubbyhole. They want to just put everything in one box. They want to say one study is like this. One species is just the same as this. But there's no other species like a shark. A shark is not a dolphin. A shark is not a turtle. It's not a whale. A shark is a shark. And so because people, on average, because of sensational films, they have such a gross misportrayal of sharks in their mind as being one way, it's pretty hard to get them to kind of overcome that fear. But also it's a balance for us because we want to replace the fear with fascination and a high, healthy level of respect. And that's a really difficult line to walk because we're not trying to portray them as puppies. We're not trying to portray them as harmless. We're not trying to say that swimming with sharks is 100% safe. I mean, they are wild animals, but I do have to say I'm definitely safer in the water with them than I am driving down the road with highly emotional human animals who are on their phone, not paying attention and making all these irrational, illogical decisions all the time. And that's a testament to, I've been in car accidents, but been doing great with the sharks. And they're very energy conservative. And so if we have time to get into the behavior, the way that we observe them is probably part of the reason there are so few adverse interactions. And that's because they're not monsters. They are intelligent and they have a high level of curiosity, but generally a higher level of caution. And so it's just, well, where is my energy expenditure? Is this worth it to me to be, in a conflict with this other animal? Do you seem capable, alive, and aware? Are you potentially like another, predator? Am I going to get hurt? And that's when you see the lower membrane, the nictitating membrane starting to come up. And so it's through those interactions. And you, just like you get to know your individuals like Rose. And so I've seen the way that like you interact with her. And while I wouldn't advise just anyone to replicate your behavior, that comes after years and years and years of getting to know individuals and really picking up on that body language. And you're also exploring. You're feeling out, okay, what are the limits of the way that we can interact? What happens if I move this way? What happens if I'm right here? How are these sensory systems? And that furthers knowledge when you share it. And that's something that, some people don't, I think, understand.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm sure you deal with and I deal with is if you have a comment, do. If not, I understand it. But like the whole the sensation on internet that people criticizing us, you and me, about interacting with sharks, mostly touching the sharks, and my response to always to people when they say is like, at least I'm not killing them, I could be doing worse. So pay attention to those like actual harm, bigger picture. But that being said, it's also we are professionals. We spend hours and hours and days and decades in the water to learn some specific animals, and we take in people, they trust us to provide safety for them because who we are. That's why a lot of people trust us. And what do you say about that? Like, are we, when we are redirecting a shark, are we changing their behavior, or is there harm to them?
That's a great question. And so I think to bring it back to your point, if you would want to go, if anyone wants to go in the water with someone to experience the beauty of sharks, to learn more about their behavior, even in furtherance of science, right? You want to be safe in the water. Would you rather go with someone that's never redirected before, that doesn't know what to do when you have a curious or more assertive shark? Or would you rather go with someone that's been there, that's had those interactions, that's seen how they respond to splashing, seen how they respond to fast movements, seen how they respond to different colorations? And so that is part of the experience. And while there could be criticism for touching, we can get into, let's think about the shark's skin. So dermal denticles, they're almost like tiny teeth-like platelets, and they've evolved to withstand a bite from many razor-sharp teeth. So they actually bite each other for mating. And so that's how thick their skin is. They also, we can't miss our next dive. That's my reminder. They also bite each other for mating. And so that is part of, they're going to sometimes have physical interaction. So many razor sharp teeth, and I don't know if people really appreciate how sharp sharks' teeth are, but if you've ever caught one and you've handled it, you actually have to be careful not to catch yourself. So our soft little human hand, as they also excrete urea through their skin, so they're actually urinating through their skin, is not going to harm the shark. So if a shark comes up to me, what would actually cause more harm to the shark is if an accident happened. If I lost an appendage, that makes the news. So by keeping the peace, that's actually helping, I think, to actually reduce stress with the animal, because they're curious. They want to find out more information. And so if they're coming up close enough to touch and they want to sense, I need to do that in a way that communicates with them. Yeah, I see you. I acknowledge that you're here. You can sense me, but we can do this in a peaceful way. And no, this is not, I'm not an interesting potential prey item, or you can just sense my bioelectrical output, which I actually feel like sometimes, because they are so electrical.
They can feel your intention.
They can feel your bioelectrical output from a scientific level because of their ampullae of Lorenzini, so the jelly-filled pores around the nose or snout, you know, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the lateral line, they can sense how you're moving. And so every living organism puts out that bioelectrical output. Some people theorize that they can actually emit electricity too, which is really interesting. But as they come up, they're coming up and they're sensing with that sensory system. And so if you're able to put your hand out, one, to maintain that respectful space, so you stay out of their mouth in case they want to investigate with their actual mouth, but most of the time they don't. But I'm really, really big on BRR, not just freezing in the water, but BRRR, and that's being respectfully ready to redirect. And that's how you keep peace with the sharks. So if they are curious, they want to come up and greet you, you don't shake hands. They don't have hands. Don't offer them your hand that way. I'm usually fins first, especially for smaller species. And I do want to just put the disclaimer out that our conversation, we're really talking mostly about tiger sharks today.
Yeah.
So we have differences in the way that we'll talk about silver tips and how the dynamic can change when we have a lot of smaller species, whether that be sandbars or galapagos or bull sharks or lemon sharks or white sharks. So, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours. Like, I mean, I could, right? Talk about sharks for 20 years. We don't have that time. But putting the fins out, looking at them, facing them, giving them the respect and acknowledgement that they deserve, and I feel that they naturally command in the water, and then being able to redirect them with a good technique so that you're not ending up in their mouth. And that's where going and training with people, rather than assuming that, oh, like, I'm a free diver, or I'm a marine biologist. I think that's the worst one. If people are like, oh, this person's a marine biologist, let's go shark diving with them. I'm like, you don't learn that from a textbook.
No.
You learn that from countless hours in the water, observing real behavior that cannot always be quantified or qualitatively described. And it's not cookie cutter. There are so many environmental considerations to factor in, social dynamics, that it's not something that people learn overnight, but it takes a certain skill set. So just to go and enjoy time with sharks, because sharks are sharks, not dolphins, not whales, not sea turtles, but you're in the home, you're their ocean. Go with someone that's experienced and knowledgeable and is actually teaching. And that's a big thing about what I love about what you guys do. It's not like you guys just safety people. You guys have the knowledge. You don't just safety people and be like, oh, that was great. No, you guys actually teach them. And that's the big takeaway, because then when they're on their own and they're traveling somewhere else in the world and a big shark swims up to them, we're going to feel better that that person will be safer. And that's better for them, better for their appendages, their family, and the shark's reputation as a whole. Because we hate when like a shark bite happens anywhere in the world. But I've basically looked into every single accident that ever happens, and usually there's a human implication in there. And sometimes that human implication is even just the choice to get into the water right after a storm. and it's murky water and there's a bull shark. And I'm not trying to like place blame on the victim, very respectful of that. I get it. People want to go enjoy the ocean, but also we share the
Having
ocean with
right
the sharks.
knowledge, like when to go
They're
and
home.
not to go. And that leads me to one of the last questions. I know we're running out of time, but
I don't want to miss the dive.
I don't want to miss the dive either. But this one last thing, like this is something you do also, and you study and you have a degree in
Ethology.
ethology, right?
Marine science too.
Yeah. And scientifically, and I am not a scientist. I don't even have any 0 degrees in my
On
life.
scientific papers, you contributed.
So I feel like there's a huge disconnect between science and what we do. We call like, I don't know, social media educators or conservation, however we label us. There's a big distinct between what we do and science. And most of the scientists that I have met, I was in Sharks International a couple of months ago in Sri Lanka, and I met hundreds of scientists across the world. And what I noticed from them is most of them have never been in the water with sharks. So they collect some data through citizen science or someone else, and they write their papers and publish it, and which is amazing, so that way we also get a lot of facts about the sharks. But one of the thing I always like, I get the criticism for discarding fish waste, and sharks are feeding on these discarded fish waste, or the tuna heads that we use for baiting. And I don't know how many times in the Sharks International people came up to me and said, you are changing the shark behavior, you're going to change their migratory pattern or their hunting pattern and this and this and that. And for me, I'm like, I know for a fact we don't do that. I know for a fact they come here for a few months and they leave and they wander around wherever they wander around in the world or in the Maldives, and they come back when they feel like to come back. So how do we coexist with the science community and us? Because sometimes I don't even feel like to respond, because there's no way I can prove to science according to them, but like I'm in the water every day, I know.
Yeah, and that actually, I love that you brought that point up, because there's a lot of naturalists out there, and that's essentially what you are. So you're observing natural behavior. A lot of indigenous populations around the world, people that actually spend the most time out there, they're observing these things. They know them to be true because they see the patterns. Oftentimes, modern science in the scientific regime and in the very square institutionalized way and approach is a little late to the scene in proving that within the scientific method. So they've got to formulate it, they've got to study it, and it's difficult to actually study things out in the ocean. It's just so dynamic, sharks are moving. And so your observations of, hey, look at site fidelity, so how often the sharks are actually coming to this area where you're discarding the fish scraps, which has been done for generations. And let's see, we've got a photo identification, right? And we can see the individuals, we're recording them, and I'm like, if their behavior is being changed, shouldn't that individual be here every day? If they just know that, hey, lunch is here every day at 10 a.m., then they should be here at 10 a.m., right? But they have really strong migrational pulls. And so we're seeing this in different areas, but again, when it's an institutional system where you have to fit it in and measure it in a very specific way, that's going to take time, and it's difficult for them to collect the data, especially if they're not going in the water. And a lot of these people that sort of grew up, they're like, don't talk to social media, that we're talking, just the guys that I studied with, they're like, don't talk to media. They always cut it up. So there's a lot of lack of information in social media that's being communicated to the public. And a lot of them don't collect data actually in the water. But those observations, once qualitative or quantified down, will essentially prove that, because you'll be able to see, okay, how often is this individual at this certain area? And there are certain types of tags that we've talked about that are less invasive, that don't require them to be hooked and risk their jaw being broken, right? That can be deployed, and then you can see the movements and you can essentially prove what you already know. And I've heard this type of story around the world where people are like, I know so much about this river because I grew up on this river. And then science is like, oh, eventually, like, we'll prove that. Or like we were talking about with Mauricio. Mauricio's like, I know that there are, predating on the seals at depth, and I'm seeing the carcasses here. I can't prove it yet, but then 5 years later, it gets
he proved
proven,
it,
and then it gets the credibility. So I would stick with the natural observations, continue to share that. I think that the science will catch up in that way. I think that science is important in the sense that when it comes down to policy change, it's really nice to be able to reference, hey, here's this study, and they've quantified these numbers. And so it's just a backup. But really, I think the public pressure, how I choose to spend most of my time rather than publishing, is really publishing stuff that the general public can actually use. Sorry, we're gonna make this dive. But information that the general public can use, because that's where human safety comes in. That's lives. And we zoom out on the bigger picture. Where we make our bigger impact for both sharks and people is educating them about the realities of shark behavior. And so if site fidelity, how often a tiger shark is coming to this area, is part of that helps people to stay safer and helps to get the sharks more protected, then that's something that we can do as part of our dives, as part of data collection, which can happen as a byproduct. But I think protecting nature and then studying it, I believe that is the order that things should be done, rather than trying to prove something through a scientific curriculum and set structure that may take 5 to 10 years. And then how many more sharks have been killed at that point? And you're really lucky here because the Maldivian government has been relatively supportive of sharks being protected, especially you going and always. I remember last time we talked when they started to open the deep sea shark fishing, you went and talked to the president and was like, hey, Fuvahmulah, you got to protect it. This is very special. You're speaking up for those sharks, and you have people around the world doing that. But it's unfortunate to hear that they're opening some kinds of shark fishing here.
But I think those legislation is not going to go through because it's only Gulper sharks, and Gulper sharks, I think this year have been put in on the CITES list, so they can't import or export any of it. So it's going to get scrapped eventually. So hopefully. Before we finish, what's the one last message? If you are a shark, what would you tell to the humans?
I would say my lifetime on this planet has come at a very interesting time frame, because in the last couple decades, especially with the boom in China's middle class economy, explosion, the demand for shark fin soup rising up, the way that I grew up getting to see sharks, getting to see healthy corals and healthy reefs, and then the degradation of those reefs due to overfishing, due to plastic, and then just the devastation that's happened to shark populations. The timing of it has been really interesting. And so if I were to be an ambassador for the shark, my time on this planet for that reason is really, I hope people can truly begin to appreciate sharks for being sharks, an important part of marine ecosystems, picking up the weak, wounded, injured, sick, dead, dying animals, eating like every other animal needs to eat, and not looking at them as monsters as they've been portrayed in the last, couple decades or even longer, especially in Western culture. So if they could just start to appreciate that, and despite their feelings about sharks, whether they like them, they fear them, they hate them, just giving them the respect that they deserve to exist and to support the protection of sharks around the world is really going to benefit future generations. And to give them the credit that they deserve, because there are so few human fatalities. And you think about all the millions of people around the world going into the ocean, the shark's home, all day, every day, doing things they probably shouldn't be doing, not looking around, paying attention. And the sharks swim past people, swimmers, surfers, divers, all day, every day. So I really hope that people will be able to zoom out, look at the bigger picture, look how they spend their life, their time, their energy, and their voice, and see what they're supporting and see what they're furthering. Are they actually helping to make a positive change in the world and using their time in a good way? Or what's the alternative? But thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you've done, not just for this community, but for all the lives that you've reached around the world, the shining example that you are. And I really, truly hope that more people from around the world will take that plunge and that step and come dive with you and your amazing team at Pelagic Divers Fuvahmulah, and do it because you guys are doing it in a respectful way that benefits life both below sharks and above sea level.
And thank you. I think if everyone will agree, you are the biggest ambassador for the sharks and their protection, and I think millions of people in the world look up to you and get inspired by you, and I'm one of them, to get in the water and appreciate these sharks. And thank you.
It's a community effort.
Yeah, like,
I was like, you're saying like
I
I'm
know
the biggest,
you don't
but I was
take
like,
compliments, and it's
I
hard
don't.
for you, but like
But it's a
honestly,
community
you
effort.
are that person.
That's sweet of you
Yeah.
to say. I'm like, I'm going to do this forever. And I always have way before social media. But the thing is that real change happens with more people getting on board and speaking
Yeah.
up. And I'm big on like the collaborative aspects of you can approach conservation, protecting nature, respecting nature from a lot of different ways. And I think that that's important, that people feel included. You don't have to be a marine scientist. You don't have to be a business owner. You don't have to own a nonprofit. It's like, honestly, like media makes a massive impact. So thank you even for organizing this today. I love that you're taking this to the next level. I'm like, oh, I'm not even doing this. Actually, you're one of like, I barely ever do podcasts. So like, but it's because I can sit down and just have a conversation with you.
Thanks for doing it. I appreciate it.
No. I'm like, love everything that you're doing, and you're really getting that message out more and more. And I hope that people can see that on the bigger picture. You don't shy away from anything. And like for me, I just want to be in the water with the sharks, out in nature, and like, but you know, we got to speak up. So I was like, we got to go. Okay, we're going to go enjoy time with the sharks. So thank you so much. You're amazing.
Thank you.
This is so cool. Okay.